Good afternoon, welcome, and thank you all for joining us on this special day for the Chicago Cubs. To start things off, I'd like to turn things over to Cubs President of Baseball Operations, Theo Epstein, for some opening remarks and a jersey presentation.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. Before we begin, I'd like to thank Levy Restaurants and all the staff here at Spiaggia for hosting. You've been terrific hosts. We just had a really nice lunch and no spaghetti sauce on anyone's white shirt, so we're good. I'd like to begin by acknowledging some people who are very important to John and very important to the process. Start with John's lovely wife, Farah, in the front row. Their kids, Hudson and Walker. Guys. Nice. John's parents, John and Kathy. All right. Farah's parents, David and Polly Johnson. And from ACES, the Levinson brothers, Seth and Sam Levinson, and Josh Yates. Where are you guys? Thanks. You guys ran a fantastic process, and we're very supportive of John and his family through every step of the way. So we really appreciate how you conducted your business on this one. Thank you, guys. From the Cubs, our chairman, Tom Ricketts, is here. He likes to hide in the back usually. Tom, thanks for all your support on this. There he is. And Crane Kenny, president of business operations. Thanks for being here, Crane. So as you all know, we're here today to announce the signing of Jon Lester and to introduce him as a member of the Chicago Cubs. This is a very, very significant day for the Cubs for a lot of reasons, a lot of great reasons. Obviously, we get better on the field. John is the perfect pitcher to lead our rotation for where we want to go. We get better in the clubhouse with John's character and his work ethic and his ability to perform at his best when the games matter the most. That all sets a great example for other players. We get better in the community, as I know John and Farah plan to continue their terrific work with the Never Quit Foundation fighting pediatric cancer here in Chicago now. And beyond that, this signing really marks a transition of sorts for the Cubs, the start of a period where we are clearly very serious about winning a World Series, bringing a World Series to the Cubs and the people of Chicago. Speaking of that, it's a great day for our fans. They've been so patient with us, incredibly patient over the last few years, and they truly deserve a pitcher and a person of this caliber to call their own. And lastly, obviously just a wonderful day for John and his family. And, he's sitting here next to him. He's come a long way from the 18-year-old kid who showed up for his first day in professional baseball in the Gulf Coast League 12 years ago now. It's been a while. He's now one of the best pitchers in baseball. He's a two-time World Series champion. He's a tremendous family man. And he's someone who now, is mature enough to, we believe, come here for all the right reasons. Someone who can look at the next chapter of his career and say to himself, I want to win a World Series with the Chicago Cubs. So John and Farah, thank you for putting your trust in us and in the Chicago Cubs. We look forward to a lot of great times together. And without further ado, we're very, very proud to introduce Jon Lester, the newest member of the Chicago Cubs.
Thanks, Theo. John?
All right. Thanks, Theo. Thank you, Jed. Just a few quick thank yous before we get this thing started. Obviously, I want to thank my wife, Farah, and two boys. I know how hard this process was, not only on myself, and to put them through the stresses of this was very difficult on us. But thank you for dealing with it, and thank you for being there. Obviously, my whole family that's here right now, my mom and dad, my father-in-law, mother-in-law. So thank you guys for all the support over the years. I know it's been a long road, and you know, we finally got there, and we got a long way to go. So on the business side of things, thank you, Sam, Seth, Josh. I know a lot of crazy phone calls and long nights for you guys, so thank you for all your hard work. You know, to the Ricketts family, for believing in my family, to come here and you know, hopefully chase that dream of winning a World Series. And last but not least, you know, Theo and Jed, and all the guys in the baseball ops put a lot of time and effort into this, and believe in us, like I said, about the Ricketts family. So it's just a huge honor to be a part of this organization, and you know, hopefully, like Theo said, World Series to come. So we're very excited.
Thanks, John. At this point, we can open it up for Q&A. We do have wireless microphones circulating, so please wait for a mic to ask your question, and please state your name and affiliation prior to doing so.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
John, Carrie Muscat, is that on? Mm-hmm. Okay. Carrie, Carrie Muscat with MLB.com. Jason Hamill mentioned that you had talked to him and did a little scouting report before coming here. Can you talk about what they told you, he and Samardzija?
I mean, yeah, I mean, I think I asked a lot of questions to a lot of different guys about different teams and organizations, and, you know, obviously having Jason Hamill and Samardzija there, just wanted to get their feel for what Chicago brought and what made them happy here. They had nothing but good things to say about it, both on a city standpoint and an organization standpoint. So, you know, with that being said, they weren't the only guys I questioned throughout the whole process, but obviously playing with them every day, you know, I had the privilege of talking to them a little bit more about it.
John, Jim Rose from ABC7. I understand that the history of the Cubs had something to do with you signing on for this adventure of trying to win a World Series, and that's one question. And the other is, did you realize that this kind of interest in this storied franchise from not only the media but the fans was as big as it is?
No, that wasn't a surprise. You know, like we just talked about with Hamill and Samardzija. I mean, they gave me that insight, and then obviously going through the process and talking to Jed and Theo about it, I got a good sense of you know, just how crazy these fans are about their Cubs baseball. You know, obviously coming from a franchise like the Red Sox and knowing how those fans are, I think that'll be a very easy transition for us. But no, I mean, I think that just adds excitement to it. You know, we know every night that they're going to be there cheering us on, and that just makes our job that much easier.
Megan Mauki, CBS Chicago. Obviously, you've won before. So how much was the challenge of coming here, the challenge of the Cubs not winning the World Series, entice you at this point of your career?
Absolutely. You know, obviously, first and foremost, you know, I want to win regardless of where I'm at. That's something that we talked about extensively when we met. And, you know, I believe in the plan and that they have in place right now for the future of the Cubs. And, you know, obviously, you know, leaving a place that you've already won and that comfort of that is difficult, but also relish in the process of you know, the chance at winning a World Series for a franchise that never has, just adds that little extra for me.
It's Phil Rodgers with MLB.com. For Theo, you guys got to Boston about the same time, and I'm wondering, John Lester's draft year 2002, your first year with the Red Sox, how involved were you with the draft? When did you kind of first see him, and how would you encapsulate what's allowed him to go from where he was when he started his career to now?
Yeah, we were involved in that draft in 2002. Obviously, great pick by our scouting director, David Chad, and John was in the group of players that we thought would be gone by the time our pick rolled around in the second round, and then his kind of velo fell off a little bit towards the end of your senior year. Then it started to fall a little bit, and we felt like it might get done. David actually hadn't seen him up to that point, so he flew out and saw him again. We were just hoping he'd get to our pick. And met John, I think, in Instructs that first year, after actually pretty great Instructs, and you look back at some of the players that were there. But just struck me as, really mature, compared to most high school kids that you get your first year, but still a lot of growth ahead of him physically, mentally, and fundamentally with his delivery. And it was just a pleasure to see him grow through the system, and obviously did a great job breaking in and then overcoming a lot of adversity that next year, finding himself the winning pitcher of the deciding game of the World Series, and just really took off with his maturity. And I've even noticed when we sat down for dinner during this negotiating process, I think over the last 3 years when I haven't been around John, he's really fully matured, just very comfortable in his own skin, extremely confident, at a great place in his personal life with his family and in his professional life, knowing the impact he can have on a baseball team, both on the field and in the clubhouse. So I think that 18-year-old kid certainly wouldn't have been ready for this challenge, and emotionally everything that comes with it, being one of the lead guys out front, trying to win a World Series for the first time in over a century. But the John Lester that sits to my right is certainly ready for that challenge in every way.
John, Dan Roan from WGN-TV. You talked about embracing the challenge of helping the Cubs win. Having said that, how difficult was it in the end to make the ultimate decision, and was there anything one way or the other that kind of tipped it in for you?
I think anytime, you're at a place for a long time, it's obviously a difficult decision, whether it's in everyday life or it's a job like this. But I just believed, like I said, I believed in the plan these guys have. And it felt like the right fit for us at the right time. And, obviously that took a lot of time to get to, a huge process that me and my wife and family went through to make this decision. And, anytime you change something that drastic, it's going to be difficult. But we fully buy in, and we take on the responsibility of trying to bring in the city a World Series.
Hi, John. Bruce Miles from the Daily Herald. You pitched in Fenway Park, which can present challenges for left-handed pitching. What can you say about the challenges of pitching at Wrigley, which on some days is a great hitter's park and on others is a great pitcher's park?
Well, it's hard to speak on that just because I've only pitched there one time. Really only been there one time. So that's kind of difficult. I know when we were there, it was a hot summer day, and, the ball was carrying pretty well. But, you can't, just like pitching anywhere, you can't let the outside things you can't control distract you. So just try to be at the bottom of the zone all the time, and hopefully they don't lift it up into that wind. And when we do have the wind that's blowing in, you just throw it down the middle and see how far they can hit it. So, there's advantages and disadvantages, and you just got to roll with it as you go.
John, Sahadev Sharma, Baseball Prospectus. In 2012, you really suffered through possibly your worst season of your career. 2014, possibly your best. What changed? Was it mechanically, mentally, changing your repertoire? What was it that changed in those 2 years?
Well, I think going back to that time, I think 11 set me up for 12. I fell into a lot of bad habits in my mechanics and wasn't really in good position at all. Ball flattened out on a lot of my pitches, and just for whatever reason, took a while to correct. And about halfway through 12, we finally figured out what was going on and made those adjustments. And I feel like, obviously my stats don't show it, but I felt like I threw the ball better in the second half of 12 than I did in 11 and half of 12. So then leading up to 14, I think just going through what I went through in 13, kind of the ups and downs of the season, and then getting to the point of the World Series where I was pretty locked in on a lot of different aspects of my game. And I like Theo said, I just feel more comfortable in my skin. I feel more comfortable with the role that I was in. I was looked upon as that guy, and I ran with it, and I felt like that just put me in a better position for 14.
John, Nick Cafardo, Boston Globe. What was it like having all those teams kind of coming after you with different proposals and personal visits and things like that? And ultimately, when did you make that final decision? Was it the day before it was announced, the day it was announced? Was it a week before that, or?
Well, I kind of described the process in two different forms. I think when you're sitting there meeting with people, we got to come to Chicago and enjoy the city and meet these guys. And we had some other teams that came into our house and meet with those people. And I think that's kind of the fun, exciting time. You know, you get to hear different philosophies. You get to meet different people that you normally won't probably ever be around. And then you have kind of the second phase where you have to sit down and make a decision. And that part for us was not fun. As Sam and Seth and Josh can attest, I mean, that was a lot of phone calls, a lot of minutes sitting down and thinking about what we're going to do. But as far as the decision making, I mean, we made it literally hours before it was probably announced. You know, just sitting down with these guys and sitting down with my wife and just trying to iron it out. And, you know, it came down to that final moment where we just put our fist down. So this is it. This is where we're going to go. This is where we feel the most comfortable. And you know, we're not people that are going to put one foot in the pool. We're going to dive in with 2 feet, and that's what we did.
John Evan Fitzgerald, Fox 32. You've been on the biggest stage, you've won on the biggest stage, and you've personally excelled. When you think about taking that experience and from a leadership standpoint, bringing it to this team and this roster, especially this young roster, how do you plan on embracing that role here?
Well, I mean, for the people that know me, I'm not a very vocal guy. You know, I treat my job as a job, but I have fun doing it at the same time. And I guess that's the role I'm going to take, the role that I've always tried to do, just put my head down and do my work and show guys that I'm not here to screw off. I'm here to win, and I'm here to do my job to the best of my ability. And that's the way I've always done it. I'm never going to say, hey, look at me, I'm your leader, you know, follow me. I don't believe in that. I think sometimes that can be very fake. So for me, like I said, I'll put my head down, I'm going to go to work, and I'm going to do everything I can to succeed. And hopefully those guys see that and they do the same thing. If they don't, I can't control that. I'm just going to worry about, you know, hopefully leading this team the best I can in the way that I know how.
John, hi, Bruce Levine from WSCR in Chicago. Welcome. And
Thank you.
how much of this, all money being equal, how much is this blind faith and your trust in Theo and Jed and the people in the Chicago Cub organization?
Well, I mean, I think anytime, whether it's, you know, obviously we're speaking of the Red Sox or speaking of any other team, there's always that blind faith going into a new season. You know, you have to believe in these guys year in and year out, whether you're, you know, a first-year guy or whether you're in the position of being a free agent and going to a new team. So, you know, I think these guys did a good job of presenting me with all the information, and then the information that was left out, you know, I have people that filled those holes for every team. And, you know, like I said, the easiest way to make decisions is to have all the information in front of you, and we had more than enough information, and I believe in these guys. I believe in what they told me, whether that's the fact that I knew them before and I can kind of tell if they're BSing me or not, or if they're not. You know, if they are, then they did a good job. But you know, we, as soon as we left the meeting, had a good feeling about what they were bringing to the table as far as the future of this organization. And then obviously having the 5 years, 6 years? 7 years. I'm learning still. So, you know, that's another added thing for me that I want to be a part of.
John Greenberg from ESPN Chicago. You know, when a guy signs a contract like this for this amount of money, obviously that kind of becomes part of your identity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and a lot of extra scrutiny and things like that. What makes, I guess, you think you're prepared for that, or how do you prepare for that extra level?
I played in Boston for 8 years. I think I'm pretty prepared for a lot of things. You know, I mean that obviously for the guys that are here as a joke. I mean, I relished my time in Boston, but yeah, I mean, you just have to accept it. I mean, I can't change it now. I mean, it's obviously next to my name. It'll always be next to my name, whether it's a good start or a bad start. But like I said earlier about how I go about my work, I just have to believe that I'm going to be prepared every start, and that's all I can control. Hey, come here. Come on. You gotta be quiet, all right? Okay.
Hey, John.
Sorry. Yes.
Kelly Crawl here with Comcast Sportsnet here in Chicago, and he can help you answer this one. But
Hi.
you've talked about the team and that you'll be joining, and I also want to ask just about the coaching staff. You mentioned changing pitching a couple years ago. You now have Chris Basio as well as one of the best in the biz with Joe Madden. How excited are you to be joining that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, watching Joe for a long time over on the other side and how well you talk about handling young talent. I mean, he did it for however many years over there and did a very good job of it. So I'm excited for that. There'll be obviously a learning curve with anybody new, and that'll take some time for me and Chris to get acquainted. And I've heard nothing but great things about how he approaches hitters and how he approaches game planning and all that stuff. So I'm excited for that. I'm excited to work with Joe. Excited to work with a lot of these young guys. Anthony Rizzo, obviously I know him from years past, and we have obviously a pretty unique connection together. So, it should be exciting to work with those guys and just look forward to it.
John, over here again. How much did knowing Theo early in your career help with your decision-making process to come to Chicago and play for the Cubs?
I think it helped, but in the end, you have to make a decision whether you know a person or not. I think, like I said earlier, all jokes aside with the, kind of the BS comment, I think when you know somebody, you can tell when they're lying to you. And obviously, I felt like that wasn't the case. And like I said, they really sold me on the fact of their plan and what they thought this team can do in the future. And, that was huge for me. Okay, buddy, stop.
Hey, John Theophilus, NBC5 Chicago. Sorry,
Where you at? Okay, yeah.
Just your thoughts on transitioning over to National League Baseball.
I think it'll take some time for me to get used to. I've played with guys in the past that, really have only played National League Baseball. So, to go along with, questioning of Hamill and Samardzija and those guys, I've questioned the David Rosses, the Jake Peavies, the Ryan Dempsters. Obviously, he got to play here for a long time, about the differences. And so I feel like I'm prepared, but you're never prepared until you actually get thrown in the fire. So we'll just figure it out as we go.
John, how many times did Pedroia call you during the process?
God.
And is he mad that he wasn't able to convince you to stay in Boston?
Obviously, I think I can't tell you how many times I've heard from him over the last couple weeks. Some interesting. Hey, stop. Some interesting. Where are you going? All right, just stand here, okay? Some interesting words along the way, but in the end, he's a good friend of mine. He'll always be a good friend of mine, and he had nothing but great things to say. He understood. He understands the process, and as sad as I was to leave those guys, I think he was just as excited for me as we are to be here. So, obviously I'll miss those guys, but we're excited for this new chapter.
This one's for Theo, Bruce Miles. Theo, if the team had not shown the improvement it did in 2014 when Anthony made his comments about wanting to contend, would this or could this signing have taken place this winter if the expected improvement was not there this winter?
After John gave us his decision, and at the winter meetings when we went back to the suite, we had a big part of our baseball front office there, and a lot of our scouts and our player development people. And I thanked them and told them that I think, from our perspective, John's decision in part was a tribute to the work that they had done over the last 3 years, because it was a pretty quick rebuild as far as, not that it's over, the building process, but as far as those things go, a lot of the good decisions it wasn't perfect at all, but a lot of the good decisions in the draft and some of the trades and the hard work by our scouts and our player development people to get us to this point where we had a very competitive team on the field for the last part of 2014, beating some good teams and sweeping the Red Sox, which probably John noticed at the time, and finishing over 500 the last couple months of the season, and then having the best farm system in baseball. I think if it weren't for those things, I don't think John Lester would be choosing the Cubs. It's not every day the best free agent goes to a team that finished in last place, and there's more to it than that. We have a lot of great things going for us, tribute to the commitment of ownership and the hard work of a lot of people on the baseball operations side, and then the passion of our fan base. So I think all those things mattered. I think, any one decision but for maybe any one decision, any one draft pick to get us to this point, maybe we're not as attractive a destination. So a lot of people contributed to getting the Cubs to a point where we were a viable contender for a pitcher like John.
What's that? I'm sorry. I mean, that's hard. I mean, I don't know. I mean, like I said, you sit down, you take all the information in, like Theo just rambled off about, the farm system, and no offense, Theo.
Not the first time I heard that.
Yeah.
Won't be the last.
With all due respect, but with all that information in front of you, you make that decision. Like he said, I like to win. People that know me know I'm not very happy when we lose or when I lose. So, for Theo to say, probably most likely it's not very often that somebody like me would come to a last place team. So, but with that said, the process and the information that they gave us and the belief in what they have here made us believe that they're not going to be in last place for very much longer, and we're excited for that.
John, Rick Tellender, Chicago Sun-Times. You had all that information. Looking at the team, you haven't played for them, you haven't played for Joe Madden, but looking at the team as it's currently comprised, do you have a sense of when the Cubs can contend for the World Series, or at least win the division, that kind of thing?
Well, I mean, I can tell you honestly, I wouldn't be here if I didn't think they were going to win in 2015. So that's how I think, and I'm never going to say, well, we'll be all right this year and we'll get them next year. I'm going in with the intention of winning in 2015, and that means the division, that means the World Series, that means everything. Like I said, I don't like to lose. You can call it arrogant, you can call it cocky, whatever you want, but I like to win, and that's what I'm here to do, and hopefully we can do that.
Hey, John, Bob Nightingale from USA Today. Would it have been a lot harder to leave Boston if you hadn't been traded in midsummer?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's always that unknown when we were traded, and obviously that's the unknown of going to a whole different coast, a whole different organization, a whole different philosophy. So I think going there prepared us for this time. I think if we finish out the year in Boston and you get down to this decision, I think it would be a lot harder. Not to say it wasn't hard as it was, but I feel like that broke that barrier of, well, I wonder if I can play for another team. And I think we answered those questions. So.
Okay, thanks everyone. We will end the formal portion of today's press conference here. John, once again, congratulations. Welcome to the Cubs.
Thank you.
We'll have the family come up at this time.
He's asleep?
Didn't sound like it.
There we go.
Okay. Well, come on.
Nick Cafardo of the Boston Globe joins us right now. Nick, of course, with us here as well as an MLB Network insider. Boy, Nick, you are dedicated. You're covering the Boston angle all the way to Chicago, seeing him off to his new team. I have to give you credit, Nick. Well done.
Well, I like to send off the old players to their new places and make the transition for them a lot easier, Brian.
It does. He wouldn't know what to do if you weren't out there asking him questions. All right, Nick, what are your thoughts with him saying especially, would it have been different had you not been traded by the Red Sox? What did you think of his answer?
Yeah, that was very interesting to me, because even when he was in Oakland, he would say that, he would come back to Boston and give them a hometown discount. So saying that broke the barrier of wondering whether I can pitch for another team was very interesting. And then once the offseason came along and free agency came along, he was very receptive to listening to all of the offers and the one-on-one visits by the teams, and was fascinated by it and realized that, hey, yeah, I can do this. I can move on somewhere else. where I feel comfortable. He mentioned that a lot, feeling comfortable with the Chicago Cubs situation. Theo Epstein, Jed Hoyer, owner Tom Ricketts must have done a great selling job on this Cubs franchise moving forward and being contenders in the next couple of years.
Yeah, he also said, Nick, that the decision was made just hours before it was announced, and you had some heavy hitters in there. Obviously, the Red Sox went into a full court press. The Giants are involved, and that gets your attention. It's a tremendous environment that they have out there, and of course, as defending champs. Do you get the feeling it really came down to the highest dollar amount, and there's nothing wrong with that? Or do you think that what else was in play here also factored in quite a bit?
Oh, sure. I mean, the highest dollar amount has to be probably the number one reason you go somewhere. I mean, if someone's throwing that kind of money at you with a seventh-year option for $1 zillion, I mean, this is the fifth highest pitching contract in history and the second highest AAV in history. So that has to have a huge factor. But with John, having covered him over the years, the comfort factor is huge. Now, he was very comfortable in Boston, and I know that the fact that he said it came down to the last few hours, I believe that. I really do. I think he was really torn between the two. He had a lot of friends. He mentioned, I asked a question about Dustin Pedroia, who they're very close. They have the same agents, and they were guys that Pedroia's a guy that's always calling you and bugging you, and you got to sign with us, that kind of thing. That was constant, and I'm sure that he listened to that a lot, and I think it did come down to the last few hours. I really believe that.
And Nick, let me ask you one last thing, just from the Boston angle. We're going to talk about from the Cubs' perspective, of course, here in a moment. But what is the fallout of losing Lester, given that the extension that they put out to him was way under the number that he eventually got? They let this play out, then they traded him, then they went after him again. But what's the fallout from losing a star pitcher?
Well, you don't have the ace. Obviously, he's a proven postseason pitcher who has won big games for the Boston Red Sox over the years. So that's what they have to replace. They've come up with some nice solutions in the interior aspect of the rotation. Now they need that guy at the front of it, and there are still guys out there: James Shields, Cole Hamels, Jordan Zimmerman. They all qualify as that ace type of guy that I think the Red Sox will have a hand in here as the weeks go by.
Hey, I've lied. One last thing then, as far as Theo and Jed Hoyer and the Red Sox connection, what do you make of that they were bidding against each other?
Well, I think it feels really good for Theo and Jed, and probably not so good for Larry Lucchino and John Henry and the Red Sox ownership. I think they both tried hard to get him, and I don't think the Red Sox would have gone as far as the Cubs did. But I really believe that the Cubs needed John Lester probably more than the Red Sox did, and just trying to build their franchise and add credibility to their franchise.
All right, Nick Cafardo again, Boston Globe out there in Chicago. Thank you, Nick. Good talking to you again.
Thanks, Brian.
And we're joined now by MLB.com columnist Phil Rodgers. Phil was in Chicago today for the John Lester press conference. And Phil, we watched the presser, and I get the feeling you were hearing a guy who took his time, made a difficult decision, but is now extremely comfortable with the decision he made.
Yeah, I think there's no question about that. And a club that's very comfortable with the investment they made in the player. I mean, it's very unusual to have a free agent go to a last-place team to begin with, but then to go back and rejoin a front office that's run by guys who they've won world championships together. So, unusual circumstance. The two things I took out of it, though, had the Red Sox not traded him in July, it would have been a lot tougher for the Cubs or anybody else to go in and get him to leave Boston now. And secondly, the fact the Cubs have never won, and the fact this is kind of seen by a lot of people in baseball, including Theo Epstein, and now it's clear to me John Lester, sort of baseball's holy grail, gave the Cubs a little bit extra appeal to them.
It's interesting when you mentioned it that, he went through that in Boston, the winning and obviously not winning a World Series, and he overcame that. Do you think that it translates? I know he was asked that question. What's your thought there, Phil, when you know what you've seen out of John Lester and just kind of the whole scene there in Chicago?
Well, I think there's many, many pieces that it's going to take to go into winning a championship in any place. And, you know, I think John Lester is another brick in the wall, like Joe Madden was, in positioning the Cubs to win. I mean, you know, this is a team that, if my math is right, I think the Cubs have now lost their last 10 postseason games. And something happens when you get to October, it gets really difficult to win. I mean, it will help. You know, I mean, Theo Epstein has seen it. John Lester wasn't on that 04 Boston team, and I think the appeal of trying to be on the team that wins when everybody says you can't because that particular team never does win, you know, I think it appeals to Lester that he'll have a shot to do that. But, you know, I think this is just another really smart move by the Cubs that, you know, along with what they've done to totally build up this farm system, is a really smart move.
A lot of the talk recently has been about Lester's contract. Lester somehow has been able to funnel his energy into pitching.
Nasty cutter there from Lester. That curveball there, that is nasty. There's strikeout number 12 for John Lester. 7 in a row retired by the left-hander.
He has every one of his pitches working today.
John Lester, now a member of the Chicago Cubs after an outstanding year with the Red Sox and then the A's. And you see 4th in ERA in 2014 in the American League, 2.46. Better than a strikeout per inning as well. John Lester off an outstanding year and signing a long-term contract with the Chicago Cubs. And he joins us right now. John, it's Brian Kenny with Ken Rosenthal, Cliff Floyd, and Todd Zalecki. First of all, kudos to you on the selection of the tie, the color coordination with the uniform. Cliff especially really appreciates that. That's next level, John. Well done.
100%. Well, hey, I had nothing to do with it. It was my suit guy down in Florida did it for me.
There you go. You got it all going on. I know, John, we had spoken to you once on MLB Now when you were with the Red Sox. We talked about the process, and you repeated some of it today, that these things aren't easy to deal with. What was difficult about being in a contract year and being out there performing, knowing that there was so much on the line?
I mean, it's just one more added distraction. I mean, Cliff knows. I mean, this game's hard enough as it is without any more distractions. And when you add that to it, I mean, you're talking about your future. You're talking about, you know, where you're going to be in a couple months. And when you don't have that security, it becomes a little bit more difficult. So, you know, it was a hard year, but at the same time, for whatever reason, I was able to block it all out for the most part and go about my business and pitch pretty well.
How did the trade to Oakland affect your decision?
I don't think it affected anything. I think what it did is it allowed me to realize that I could play in another uniform and play for another organization. I mean, obviously, when you only know one thing and you look at guys that switch teams all the time, you wonder how they're able to do that and still perform. For me, you know, you get that comfort, you get that consistency, that routine all the time, and that breaks and you go to another team. You don't really know what to do. And for some reason, I guess maybe because I knew a lot of people there and maybe had Johnny Gomes with me, that just made that transition a little bit easier for me and made me realize that I could pitch in another uniform.
John, listening to your press conference earlier today, it was interesting to hear you say how much you enjoyed the meet and greet part of free agency, but then when it came time to making the actual decision, that was really difficult. What made it so hard?
Well, I mean, obviously, you know, I mean, you go through that courting process, and you know, it's very flattering and humbling, and you got all these guys that come into your home, or you know, I got to come up to Chicago and meet these guys, and they sit there and tell you how great they are, how great you are, and how much, you know, you would help their organization and all these things, and they leave, and you're sitting there going, okay, yeah, I can play for that team. But when it comes down to the nuts and bolts and making a decision for your family, it becomes very tough. I mean, obviously, I've spent a lot of time in Boston, and part of my heart will always be in Boston. I've had nothing but great times there, and met a lot of great people, and had a lot of great relationships there that I'll always remember. And you know, that made it difficult. And you know, meeting with some other teams, it just makes the process so much harder. And I mean, you're talking about the next 6 or 7 years of your life, and you want to make sure you make the right decision. And not only for you on a professional level, but for your family. You don't want your family to come someplace and be miserable. So it definitely was a hard process, but at the same time, I'm glad I went through it, and it's something that I'll always remember and cherish. And in the end, now that it's over, I can say that we definitely enjoyed it.
Now, John, you talk about, challenges and still learning. You're coming from organizations where you've won and you've overcome, a lot of obstacles. Now you're going to a different challenge, a team that's trying to find their identity. Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean that's something that kind of led me to this team. I like that challenge of, where they're going to go, and obviously, I wouldn't have come here if I didn't believe that they would win now, and I believe that. And obviously, having Joe, bringing him over, and some of the other things that Theo has done, that I believe. I believe that they're going to win, and I like that challenge of, another curse. I didn't get to be involved in the 2004 Red Sox, but hopefully I'll get to be a part of this one. And if we're able to do that, I mean, you're talking about a party of all parties. So it's an exciting time for me. It's an exciting time for this organization, and I can't wait to get going.
John, you just mentioned the party of all parties. How much of the fact that Theo, Jed have a track record of doing this type of thing make you feel a little bit more comfortable about coming into a situation with a team with a lot of bad history, a lot of losing, a lot of shortcomings, and postseason kind of disappointments?
Yeah, I think that obviously helps. I said in the press conference earlier, and having that relationship with Theo and Jed, I can kind of tell when they're BSing me or when they're being honest, and they laid it all on the table. They pulled out all the stops and laid out every piece of information they could in front of me to help educate me. And it wasn't a sales pitch. It wasn't lying and trying to cover things up with gimmicks or anything like that. It was just straightforward. This is what we've got. This is what we believe in, and we believe we're going to be contenders and winners year in and year out. And that meant a lot to me because, in this, obviously you guys know in this game, it can be full of a lot of BS and a lot of sales pitches. And I was very, very humbled and respected them even more that they didn't do that to me and my family, and didn't waste our time, put everything on the table and laid it out there and said, this is what we're planning on doing. We believe in these guys and we're going to win.
John, how close was it at the end? Because you had mentioned during the news conference that the decision was made just hours before it was announced. And we hear about the Giants. We know what a great place it is to play in San Francisco. They come off a world title. How close was it?
Very, very, very. Obviously everybody sits here and says it's not about the money, and people can take that for what it's worth. But in the end, you've got to weigh your decisions, like I said, about obviously your professional career and what your family's going to be happy with. And the Giants, the Red Sox, and the Cubs all showed me nothing but great respect, and I was honored and very humbled that they all treated me with the same, and I was more than flattered with everything that they did for us. So, yeah, I mean, it came down to the wire, and it came down to me getting yelled at and making a decision. And we finally had to sit there and iron it out and make a decision. And it really was, hours before it came out.
John, who was yelling at you?
Yeah, Ken Rosenthal, who yelled at you?
I had a few people that like to yell at me about some things. So I'll leave them nameless right now.
All right. Now we understand. We all have that. For me, it's Ken. Yeah. John Lester. John, hey, congratulations on the choice, and best of luck in Chicago. Good talking to you again.
All right, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, Pat Hughes, our friend and the longtime voice of the Chicago Cubs on WGN Radio, is going to have some kind of fun this year. We're just guessing that the Cubs are going to be sexy again, that they're going to be fun to watch again, and they might actually be good this year, which would be awesome.
Yes.
I mean, it's better for baseball when the Cubs.
They're always fun. You know it's going to be a great party.
I don't know about that.
The ballpark.
The ballpark's always fun.
Yeah.
Team has not been that much fun the last few years, but I think all that is changing for the better. And Pat joins us on Hot Stove this morning. Pat, you were probably sitting back watching the news come in from San Diego with open arms. I mean, this is going to make your spring and summer a good time.
I was thrilled. I was happy when the Cubs signed Jason Hamill, and I was happy when they acquired Miguel Montero from Arizona, but then I was ecstatic when I read about the news about John Lester. I thought the Cubs, Matt and Harold, were going to be good even before that signing. The Cubs have Joe Madden managing the ball club, a lot of fine young talent coming up through the system. But then when you get a guy like Lester, I think that immediately establishes you as a legitimate contender to vie for the division championship.
Hey, Pat, and that division is constantly changing right now. It looks like there's a window of opportunity. Am I missing something, or are you seeing it that way?
Well, possibly, Harold, but I think you could probably make a case that this is the strongest division top to bottom in the big leagues. Window of opportunity, possibly, but remember the St. Louis Cardinals are still in the division, and they would have to still be considered the team to beat.
Now, in terms of the position players, Pat, and the holdovers, I say holdovers, many of whom have only been there for a short time and are just getting their beaks wet in the big leagues. Last time we had you on the program, we talked a little bit about Jorge Soler, who seems to be the closest to a finished product of the young guys that we might see. Between Baez, Soler, and some of these other young prospects, are these additions going to expect bigger performances from those guys than might have ordinarily been the case?
It's a good question, and I'm not really sure how to answer that. I think you hope that most of your prospects come through and fulfill expectations. Realistically, you know that not every single one of them will, but you hope that maybe, 75% or at least 50% of the guys coming through do live up to their capabilities. But I like Jorge Soler. I've only seen him play about 30 or 40 games, but he just had that look. I mentioned last week or a couple of weeks on your program, he homered in his first big league at-bat at the Great American Ballpark in Cincinnati off Matt Latos. But then he was getting hits against the better pitchers. And Harold and Matt, that always impresses me when a guy comes up and starts lashing out line drives against guys like Clayton Kershaw and Adam Wainwright and Giovanni Gallardo, experienced elite pitchers. When a young guy gets hits off those guys, you think, hey, maybe we got something here.
Hey, in terms of what might be next, Pat, and I've heard a lot of discussion. I don't know if it's real or just kind of rumored rampant stuff, but that there might be another pitching addition here. Is there more left in the coffers for, say, a James Shields, of whom I'm sure Joe Madden is fond and with whom he's worked in the past?
I don't have access to the financial records, Matt. It's not my money, so I say go ahead and spend it. No, I'm not sure. When you do outlay cash in excess of $150 million for John Lester, you wonder exactly how much is left in the kitty. But again, I think the Cubs have made a statement that they are all in. They are trying to win. And you talk about a guy like Lester. This guy's 49 games above 500. And I always look at those records. I say, if you can get one pitcher on your staff to be 10 above, say he goes 17-7, and the rest of the staff just pitches 500 ball, that gets you to a record of 86-76, and you're going to be at least a wild card contender. If you get two starting pitchers that can do that, now you get 20 games above, you're 91-71, and you're almost certainly in the playoffs.
No, that's a great formula.
Yeah.
And I think Lester going to the National League is going to be a big boost up, too. Hey, my question real quick for you, Pat, is the city of Chicago. We touched on it earlier. The White Sox are doing things. The Cubs are also doing things. Who's winning the headlines right now, and how excited are people in Chicago?
I think everyone is thrilled. I think people are already talking about a Cubs-White Sox World Series. I don't know if any of our nervous systems could handle that. Even when both teams are down in the standings and they have a series either at Wrigley Field or on the south side, fans are just in a frenzy. I cannot literally even imagine how exciting that would be to have an all-Chicago World Series.
Yeah, regional matchups like that sometimes kind of fail to include everybody else. But if it's the case of Chicago v. Chicago next fall, I think the whole world gets involved in that. Pat, thanks for the phone call. We always appreciate the insights and the conversation. Have a great holiday season.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Harold. Happy holidays to you guys, too.
Thank you. You too, Pat.
Pat Hughes joining us to talk Cubs.
To welcome in the president of baseball operations for the Cubbies, Mr. Theo Epstein. And Theo, thanks for spending some time with us. It's Fran Charles, John Casey, and Cliff Floyd. First up here, why was this such an important signing for your organization? I know that you know John ever since he was a kid. You guys won a couple of World Series, or he won a World Series championship with you, and then he won another one in 2013. But why was this so important for you?
Well, we're making the transition as an organization from a period when we're rebuilding and just collecting young assets to a period when where we're going to be competing at the highest levels. And it was really important to us. So much of our rebuilding strategy has been based on accumulating young position player prospects because of the certainty and impact that they bring. We knew we were going to need to acquire impact pitching from outside the organization, and to have, a pitcher and a person the caliber of John Lester put his faith in us and our plan and come here really transforms the organization, gives us a dominant rotation and a leader in our clubhouse, and it's a great sign for the future.
Theo, hey man, it's Case. Congrats. You got your guy back with you, Johnny Lester. I love it. Hey, listen, I know you, buddy, and I know you were stressed out during this process. How were your nerves with you and Jed waiting to see when Johnny Lester was going to sign with you guys?
It was good. We had a great meeting early on in the process. We made a great connection. We thought there was a lot of momentum, and then we went first, so it was hard to wait it out as other teams got involved, and we sent him gestures and tried to stay connected so we didn't lose the momentum. But yeah, there were some white knuckles involved, and the Levinsons, those guys are like vampires. They work real late at night, so we had to get up in their suite and sweat this thing out, and it was great, getting that call that he wanted to be a Cub for all the right reasons meant the world to us. Then it was a thrill to be able to go down to our suite and tell our scouts and our development people who've worked so hard to get the organization to this point where a guy like John Lester would consider actually coming here, giving them the news was really a thrill.
Theo, Cliff here. When you bring in a guy like John Lester, I think the fans look at this, and now they want you to add more. When you look at this team as is assembled today, do you look to make some more moves before spring training?
Yeah, we're always looking to add if we can. I think the addition to John gives us a really strong and deep starting pitching staff. We run 6, 7, 8, 9 deep now, which is unusual for us for this point of year, and you need at least 9 to get through the course of a season. We're looking for a left-handed bat. Who wants dibs? Sean Casey and his 20 speed, or Cliff Floyd? We can't find a glove for him. Which one of you guys wants to join the Cubs?
I'll take dibs.
Yeah, give me a couple dibs on it.
All right. You know what? You won't have to face John Lester, that two-seamer on your hands and a nasty cutter away. You won't have to deal with that.
I'm swinging at the first pitch. I'm getting out there in a hurry. You don't have to worry about me sticking around long.
All right.
Not to mention, Theo, these guys.
Let Case get on, and then you got a pinch run for him.
Yeah, I definitely need a pinch runner.
These guys would want too much money from you, Theo, so keep them off your books. So let's get back to Lester here. And I love the news conference because he said, look, I'm not one of these guys who's going to come in here and say, hey, we're 2 years away or we're 1 year away. He said, I am looking for 2015 to be a big year for the Chicago Cubs. Where do you assess the value of your ball club here and how much they will be competitive in 2015?
Yeah. I think we're going to be very competitive. Anthony Rizzo set the tone the last day of the season when meeting with the media. They asked him what the goals were for 2015. He said, win the division. Just, clear as day. We're here to win the division. We finished over 500 the last 2 months of the season. Then Joe Madden took it to another level at his press conference, talked about winning the World Series next year. That's when I started sweating a little bit, but he ratcheted it up a little bit, winning the World Series. And then Johnny Lester today, obviously, just the very act of him coming here, I think, validates where we are in the building process and that we can be a competitive team. Maybe not our very best team. I think we're going to have a long window where we compete at the highest level, but certainly we're out to contend in 15. And people ask if we're, all in for 2015. The way I've tried to put it is that we're all in for our future. and our future starts in 2015. So we're very, very serious about next season.
Biggest free agent ship so far, John Lester going to the Chicago Cubs, officially announced Monday, and the president of baseball operations, Theo Epstein, spending some time with us on MLB Tonight. Thank you, Theo. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Let's get to it. With the world-renowned showbiz. Became official on the north side of Chicago. John Lester, 6 years, $155 million. He will wear Kerry Wood's old number 34. And hopefully he'll be able to help the Cubbies do something Kerry Wood and millions of other players haven't. Get them to the promised land.
Well, I mean, I can tell you honestly, I wouldn't be here if I didn't think they were going to win in 2015. So that's how I think, and you know, I'm never going to say, well, you know, we'll be all right this year and we'll get them next year. I'm going in with the intention of winning in 2015, and that means the division, that means the World Series, that means everything. Like I said, I don't like to lose. You can call it arrogant, you can call it cocky, whatever you want, but I like to win, and that's what I'm here to do, and hopefully we can do that.
All right, first of all, I loved this press conference. I loved it. I thought that is spot on right there. But how factually accurate is he? Are they close right now?
They're close. But look, you know, I love John Lester, and I'm with you, Chris. I mean, this guy, you talk about just a tough guy, has been through it, he gets it. And I think what's so impressive about this, Chris, is, you know, for Theo Epstein and the Cubs to get this guy, land him, bring him on for that 6-year deal, the big money. They had 73 wins last year. So even if you say most optimistically, what, a 10-game spread where they can get up to over 500, let's even say they push it even higher than that. I think John Lester's in the right place. I think this is the absolute biggest move. And I know the White Sox made a lot of big moves, and I know the Red Sox and the Marlins. But to get John Lester and convince him that he will be the ace and the core as he moves forward, and listening to Theo during the press conference about what he means to not only every fifth day, but what he means in the clubhouse. I love this guy. This is a great, great sign by the Cubs.
Yeah, I would rank the two offseason moves for the Cubs, Lester and Madden, as 1 and 1A, because I think they both bring the same thing. One of it obviously does it every 5 days and can have a huge impact on the game. I still don't see them as a playoff team in 2015, but they're finally fun to watch and they're interesting, and it's something the Cubs haven't been in several years. All these young guys, I don't know if half of them shake out and become all-stars, then that's a win. But at least the Northsiders can be proud of the path and the tack they're taking out.
You know what, Chris? I couldn't agree with you more. And I really think when you look at an organization with the amount of skilled players that they have, young players that are going to be in the field, and John Lester, Jake Arrieta, you talk about a resurgence of his career. I like Jason Hamill. You have 3 really good pitchers that are going to kind of anchor that team. Yes, there's going to be some bumps and bruises. We didn't even mention Chris Bryant. You know, he's supposed to be the best of the diamond in the rough as they come up. Solar looks like an athlete. We know what Rizzo did with the 32 home runs. This is an exciting team, and I think Theo absolutely is going in the right direction. They're tired of losing, and this is a franchise that needs to win, I believe, for baseball. I think it's a great place. As we know, you've been to Wrigley Field. If you haven't, you got to go, and the Cubs are on the rise, no question about it.
All right, let's move from the north side of Chicago out to the Bronx, where the New York Yankees have re-upped Chase Headley, 4 years, $52 million, and Brian Cashman said in the offseason, if we bring him back, it's to be our everyday starting third baseman. So I ask you, Al Leiter, that called several.
Let's start up where John Lester left off. He talked a lot about being a leader there, and he's not a rah-rah guy, but he's going to a team that has Joe Madden as a manager, so maybe he doesn't need to be a rah-rah guy, but he's certainly a guy that a young team can respect, from what he's done on the mound to what he did beating cancer earlier in his career. I mean, this is a guy that I feel like everybody in baseball respects.
Well, that's true, and he has that package that you are looking for from a front office perspective, that you go about your business and you do things the right way, and guys follow you. You know, there are different types of leaders. There's quiet leaders. There are vocal leaders. He's a quiet leader. Lead by example. Get after it. Get yourself prepared to work every single day. When you're on the mound, you're focused and you're all business. And he doesn't accept anything less but basically 100% every single pitch, not just every out, not every game, it's every pitch. And that rubs off on guys. It rubs off, and he'll hold you accountable if you don't make a play behind him, or if you're not pitching up to your best, the guy after. And so that creates an attitude or an atmosphere in the clubhouse, a no-nonsense atmosphere that, quite frankly, the Cubs haven't had there in a long time. Just because they've been developing and trying to win, trying to get to that next level. But they're there now. I think Joe Maddon, John Lester, that gives you the credibility, the resume that you're looking for. And now they can easily start to build with other pieces around them.
This decision was not made quickly. He talked about that at the winter meetings. The Giants were kind of told they weren't part of it, and then it came down to the Red Sox and the Cubs, and it kind of dragged and dragged. And it was late at night before it kind of leaked out that it would be the Cubs. It seemed obvious that he really had a hard time making that choice.
Well, and I was told both people really around Lester that the deciding factor for him was not just what's going to happen in 2015, but 2016 and 17, the plan that the Cubs put in front of him with all of the top prospects that the Cubs have, and the job that they've done, the farm system, it's #1 ranked in baseball in almost every publication. They showed that to John. They said, you know what, I want to be a part of this. It's been a long time, over 100 years they haven't won the World Series. He went through a similar issue in Boston, so he's experienced all that. Now he has a couple World Series rings. Now he wants to bring that to Chicago too. It's an exciting time for the Cubs and for Cubs fans. But I think that 2016 and 17 plan that Theo, Epstein, and Jed Hoyer laid out in front of him was equally, if not more so, impressive to him, and might have been the deciding factor.